Well, Antonio and Maggie, thank you so much for your time today. I guess I'll get right into it. We have limited time, but so the staircase. We're telling the story from a bunch of different perspectives and also on a couple different timelines. So I'm curious about how you decided on this approach over the course of thinking, the production of this series, and what was most challenging or rewarding about it.
It was interesting because this approach really developed organically. You know, I got involved with the story many years ago and trying to adapt it as a feature, and spent a while doing that. But as I was working on it as a feature, it just continued to expand. And when I started down this path in 2008, it ended one way. And by 2011, it was ending another way. And then by 2017, it was ending another way. And so it felt like just organically, the story just continued to evolve, and the shape of it kind of revealed itself. And it only felt correct that for a story as complicated as this, and for as big of the ideas that we were trying to explore, we had to take a kind of multi-strand, multi-timeline approach to do it justice, and to capture the complexity of everything that we were trying to do.
That makes sense. And you mentioned being involved in it since 2008. I know that a lot of this was inspired by the French documentary.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious to hear from both of you. What do you think that this current project, this new series, might accomplish that the older series might not have?
I think they just do very different things. I mean, the documentary is the first of its kind and kind of paved the way for all these other true crime doc series. And I think that it still stands out in its approach. It's so restrained, and the level of access is really kind of unprecedented. But I think that it's very grounded, and we are freer to explore, to go back in time. Just a very simple thing is Kathleen Peterson. Kathleen Peterson could only exist with what they had in the documentary, which were photos and some home videos where she didn't even speak. And we have the ability to create a version of Kathleen, and to take that person that was a big part of the documentary, and to give them life in a dramatized way.
The documentary, it was able to tell the story in one way. And what we saw was that there was an opportunity to tell a more holistic version of it. And that, to what Antonio was saying, that we got to look at who the Petersons were before this event, a tragedy occurred. We got to see how it unfolded in front of the cameras, but also what was happening out of frame when they were shooting the documentary. And then after the documentary team departs, we're still with them, and we're seeing what the repercussions of grief and tragedy look like for a family that's had their pain become very public. And so I think the documentary is one way to tell a story. And we get into that, like, what is storytelling? What does it look like to construct a story? And we use the documentary as a vehicle to discuss that within the greater context of telling our own story.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think it's really interesting to watch because I'd watched some of the original series as well, and it's compelling as in the way that true crime is, but you always wonder, like, what is performance and what is not. This is a way to explore that, and especially with the character of Kathleen, there's not as much to work with in terms of what she was like, what she would seem like on screen, her little quirks and actions. So how was that developed? How did Tony's feedback also fold into that process?
No, I mean, when we were creating this character of this this woman, it was like Antonio was saying, we didn't have as much information about her, but that's to say that the documentary was actually a viable piece of information, because really everyone was still performing when the cameras turned on. So we weren't necessarily getting true versions of these people. But I think with Kathleen, what it was is that whenever you write any TV show, you're taking bits and pieces of a character and bringing them to life. And what we knew about her was that, she was family oriented. She was the life of a party. She loved deeply and she felt deeply and she was committed to her job. While also like things were happening in her life that, we depict, which is she, had an accident in a pool. She was having trouble sleeping. There was a lot of stress at work. There was an empty nest. And it's about combining all of those things and kind of saying, well, who is this person? And that ultimately was such a fulfilling bit of the project, because it allowed us to give the victim agency in a way that we hadn't seen before.
Mm-hmm. Makes a lot of sense. Antonio, do you have anything to add? Should I move on to my
I would just add, the other thing about Kathleen that was just really remarkable was, she was, because it's part of the story is did Kathleen know about Michael and Michael's sexuality? And that's a big part of the mystery. And it's interesting, just you start looking at her previous marriage and the fact that her previous marriage ended because of infidelity. But you also understand that Kathleen was very open-minded and did have a progressive outlook. So you kind of, that there was this complexity to her that we were trying to explore. And, everybody thinks of Michael Peterson as the center of the story and as a sort of very complicated center of the story. What we found in creating our version of Kathleen was a very dynamic, complicated, and multifaceted person. And so in a lot of ways, I think people are going to come into the story sort of intrigued by Michael Peterson, but they're going to leave equally intrigued and fascinated by Kathleen Peterson.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And the performances so far are just incredible. And I think that's about the end of my time. So thank you so much for all of your work. And I know we're just getting started.
I know.